I was going to say one of the things about the organic thing, now, what you mentioned, where the farmers shouldn't use some people want farmers to be more organic. My opinion is like if they want their food organic, they should probably grow it themselves because farmers have, like you said, a lot to do. Like they've got families, and
Hmm.
a lot of things that's always said in the game industry is work smart, don't work hard. Because
Hmm.
if you can make a tool where you can produce 100 models instead of individual ones, you may as well use that tool. It's going to help you, it's going to save you time, it's going to save you energy. That energy can be spent somewhere else. The energy that you save can be spent on resources as well to help other people, or just have
Hmm.
time to yourself. So I always say work smart, don't work hard.
Yep, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brandon Black. In today's episode, I have yet again another consumer conversation. Joining me today is the host of the Raw Life podcast, Paul. He's going to give his own little introduction. Go ahead, Paul.
Hello. I was going to say, oh my God, I was going to do my podcast introduction there. I'm Paul. I host the Raw Life podcast. I also work in the video game industry as a 3D artist. I've recently moved. I'm originally from Tipton, which is a small place near Birmingham. And I now live in London, which is pretty good because I've been trying to get out of Tipton for years. And that's pretty much, I spend a lot of my time doing creative stuff. I'm always very, very dedicated, even though this sounds more like a CV. Play a lot of video games. I like to create stuff. And that's pretty much me. I always like to try and keep busy.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I definitely relate to that. That's really cool. I think we talked about it on your podcast, but I'm a big fan of video games. I've been involved in that my entire life. So I'm definitely able to relate to that lifestyle. It's kind of interesting. So you mentioned that you're from Tipton originally. My hometown, or actually where I grew up for most of my childhood, is a city in California that's also called Tipton.
No
So
way, really, bro?
yeah. So
That's mad.
yeah. So I'm from Tulare, but Tulare is literally it's right up against Tipton. And I went to school. I went to elementary school in Tipton, and I spent the first 10 years of my life in Tipton, and I go there all the time. Like that's basically my second home, and so that's kind of funny. You're both from Tipton.
That's pretty mad.
Two very different Tiptons, but
oh, okay. How was yours?
my Tipton was great. I love Tipton. It's all cows out there, so it smells wonderful in my opinion, but not so wonderful to the non cow fans.
Oh,
How was your Tipton?
it was horrible. I absolutely can't stand it.
Oh no.
There's a lot of people I'm not too keen on there. There's always a lot of trouble. I've got into a lot of trouble. It's just there's obviously some good people. You get the good with the bad, but like,
Oh yeah.
oh man, that place! I hate that place so much. I can't stand it.
Well, yeah, we definitely came from different Tiptons.
Yeah, I'm glad that your experience was better than mine.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, so before we jump into things, the essential question I ask everyone on this podcast is, what, if any, experience do you have with the agriculture industry?
Sorry, what do you mean by agriculture?
So, generally agriculture is kind of perceived as farming, but agriculture could be anything from like actual farming, working with animals. Lumber is considered agriculture, mining, even there's science that's involved in agriculture, technology that's being produced. Unfortunately the video game industry and agriculture don't have the best relationship, but that's a side topic. But yeah, just being involved in kind of like hands-on labor type industries that are focused around building or not building, producing food, producing fiber, that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay. I mean, like, I've never really done that. I mean, I've done hands-on work, which is like just warehouse work, or I've done cleaning for a few years, but I've never done anything where it's like producing food or like looking after livestock and stuff like that.
Awesome.
I've never really done too much of that. I've just cleaned a lot of crap and moved a lot of boxes.
Hey, that stuff's so necessary too. Well, that's that's great. So kind of the purpose of this podcast is to bring people, like yourself that don't have as much experience in those fields and kind of present them with some information about what's going on. And the reason for that, kind of the purpose behind why I do that, is because a lot of people don't really, not only do they not have that experience, but they don't know what's going on behind the scenes of how their food is grown. And because of that, they're being fed information on social media that's not necessarily true. And, that has domino effects. It causes them to vote certain ways, or it causes them to make certain decisions in their purchasing that in the long run will actually hurt themselves, and it hurts the farmers, and it hurts everyone involved, really. And so I'm trying to bring some more awareness to those types of topics so that people can be more educated in their decisions, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I'll be straightforward though. Like, the only things I know is obviously, so this is what I know. Well, it's not fact though. This is what let's just say this is what I've heard then. Mm-hmm. So farmers grow stuff, they sell it to markets freeze it sometimes, or they sell it to butchers, and then you buy the products and you cook them. And obviously with frozen things, like things get made in factories and then you buy them because they're cheaper and they last longer in date. That's obviously, that may be what's the word I'm looking for? An unusual way of seeing it. But that's the only way I really know.
Okay. Yeah, that's a fairly, I'd say that's an accurate description of how most people see agriculture. It goes from the farm to the store to the consumer, to the average person. Or like you said, like there's a factory process involved somewhere. That's kind of starting to get into the conversation of why I want to have this talk, is because people tend to realize, or tend to not realize rather, that there's different parts of that step-by-step process that are really important to making sure that food gets where it is, and that it's safe and that's healthy and all that kind of stuff. So before, we get into that, are you familiar with the farm to fork process? What steps a food product goes through before it gets to your plate?
No, I'm not familiar.
Okay, so I'll break it down for you. Basically, for the farm to fork process, let's just take name a random commodity. It could be milk or fruit, or just something. What do you like to eat?
Oh, let's go meat. I do like meat, so we can go. Can we go pig?
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we'll start over on the hog ranch. So that's the first step of the process, right? Baby pig is born. That pig is then fed out. It gets to a certain weight, and then at that weight, they decide to sell it off to the slaughterhouse. And then once it goes through the slaughterhouse, so the slaughterhouse is called a processor. The processor is an important step of the chain. So it goes producer, which is the farmer, and then processor, and then distributor, and then retailer, and then consumer. That's the actual that's the chain of chain of command when it comes to food. So once it gets to the processor, that pig is then humanely slaughtered. There's laws in place to make sure that pig has to be treated a certain way before they're allowed to knock it out and then turn it into all the ham and the bacon and all the kind of stuff that we actually get from our pigs. During that process, there's a lot of federal inspection that takes place to make sure that the meat is processed safely, that it's refrigerated at the right temperature to make sure it doesn't spoil, that it's cleaned properly. That way it doesn't have any risk of contamination. And then from there, it gets all the different cuts get sold off individually, and then the buyers of those companies then distribute them in a certain way through the distributing part of the process, and that's how they get to the retailer, which then sells them to the consumer. So basically, the short version is pig starts on the farm. Once it gets fat enough, it gets to the butcher. Once it gets to the butcher, it turns into pork chops. Once it gets from the pork shop, it goes into the packager. Packager then goes to the distributor, goes to the retailer, goes to your plate. Does that make sense?
That's mad that there's that many steps.
Right?
I had no idea there's that many steps. I thought it was just you grow a pig, you butcher it, and you sell it to the store, and they sort it out.
Right. And that's the thing, is a lot of people tend to think that way, which is fair. It makes a lot of sense. But no, there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of regulations. There's a lot of laws that prevent that thing from happening that easily, just because, that by doing that, you run a lot of risks of, food safety issues. You run into risks of, the hogs not being treated properly. You run the risk of, of like antibiotics still being in the hog. There's all kinds of regulations that are trying to keep the food as safe as possible. And not only that, a lot of people tend to think that all the food in the store is sold by the farmer. The farmer sells the food to somebody else, who then sells it to somebody else, who then sells it to the store, and then the store sells it to you. So really, the farmer has no impact on the food that you get on your plate besides just growing it. After it leaves his farm, he has no hands on it until it gets to your plate.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty mad. Okay, so what about stuff like, obviously you said the pig's got to get to a certain weight. What about when people, I know, I think it's Asia, a lot of people eat piglet, which is baby pig. So what about that sort of weight then? Because obviously that's not a full-size pig.
Right. So there are exceptions to the weight rule, and basically the market dictates that kind of stuff. So there's not like a set weight that they slaughter hogs. It's based off of how the market demand is looking for certain types of product. And so if the market has a high demand for pork chops, and they know they have to get these pigs to a certain weight before the pork chop is edible, then they have to get the pigs to that weight before they're allowed to slaughter them. For some commodities, so like you hear about like veal is kind of an example of that, because veal comes from calves, it comes from baby cows.
Yeah.
And similar to the piglet situation, like you mentioned, there's a market for that. It's a very, very high dollar market because it's so difficult to sustain that. But because the market demands it, they have regulations around that stuff too, about how old they can slaughter them before the meat is good or not good, or there's all kinds. I to be honest, I don't know what the numbers are on that kind of stuff. I know for hogs, it's in the couple 100 pounds, whereas for like the piglets and the veal calves, it's not nearly that high. They get to a certain age, and then after that age is when they start producing hormones. I think that's what it is. I think that once the maturity is the phase of maturity is starting to be reached, the meat no longer tastes as good as it would if it was like veal or if it was the piglet or whatever. So I think they kind of just figure out, okay, what age is this thing going to be before it starts maturing? That's when we need to slaughter it. And I could be wrong. Like I said, that kind of stuff is a really sticky part of agriculture, just because there's a lot of ethical debates around it. And so because of that, it's hard to get a lot of good information on it, just because a lot of it's kind of like, it's so controversial that it's hard to find what's true and what's not, kind of stuff. Like some people say that they take them right out of the womb. That's not true. They're at least raised to a certain age. I don't know what the age is. It depends on the farmer and it depends on the market. But essentially, yeah. So to answer your question, is in terms of like, how do they determine when that's ready? I think it's when they're starting to get to the maturity phase of their life.
Oh, okay. Damn. That's pretty mad how many steps there actually is though as well to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so if you think about it, it kind of sounds gross, but any food that you buy in the store, the number of hands that have touched that food before you get it it's kind of alarming almost. Like,
yeah, that sounds pretty grim.
No, it's not. Yeah, it sounds kind of nasty. All these people have touched your food before you even got it. That's why it's so important to wash your food, because people make mistakes. Human error is always something that needs to be accounted for. Although a hefty majority of the cases of foodborne illness, of like food safety issues, food poisoning, recalls, outbreaks, all that kind of stuff, a good portion of that is on the consumer's part. It's usually related to like them not preparing food in a proper way, or they're not storing it correctly or whatever. It's very rare that happens on the farming scale or on the processor scale or on the distributor scale, just because of how tight the regulations are on that stuff. Like they really have no room for error to let that stuff out, or else the entire branch gets shut down. So like if they have one farm that has a recall issue and it's a small farm, that farm might go out of business because they can't afford the suits, but it's usually, like I said, it's usually on the consumer side of things that a lot of that kind of stuff happens. And that's just because of, yes, there's a lot of steps involved to getting the food from the farm to the plate, but those steps are necessary to make sure that food is safe and healthy, and that's going to be good for everyone who eats it, and it's going to be abundant and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, damn. That's... I never thought there was that many rules and stuff like that. Okay, you was on about like obviously like washing the meat as well and stuff like that. Where do you stand on? Because I think, I don't know if it's still a debate now, but there was like a little trend where it's like, do you wash your chicken or not? And some people get it in a packet, and some people wash it, and some people say no, it's fine. Like, where do you stand on that then?
So I personally,
consumer as well, isn't it? Sorry, that's the consumer's choice as well. But why is it that like? Why is it not like? Do you wash your beef or not? It's just like no. Do you wash your chicken?
Right. So I personally, because I've studied the food safety concerns and all that kind of stuff, and I'm more aware of how the food safety procedure is handled. I personally wash, my chicken and my meat, and anything that's in its raw form, it needs to be cleaned in some way. Yes, it can be like the idea is behind, if you cook it enough, you can get a lot of that stuff out of it, and that's true. But it's better to be safe than sorry, because if you're eating chicken that is maybe you don't cook it all the way properly, and it had salmonella on it, and now you've got salmonella. So it's better to be safe than sorry and just wash it and then cook it, and then definitely to avoid cross contamination, you should be careful with that kind of stuff. Like, if you have a cutting board and you're cutting your chicken on your cutting board, don't cut your vegetables on your cutting board after that, or ground beef or whatever. Wash the cutting board or use a different one or use a different knife. Like, there's so much risk for cross contamination that people don't realize, and so like they get mad whenever they get sick, and they blame the chicken, and they blame the store, they blame the farmer, when really they just weren't being careful.
See, I didn't realize that. I knew like if you have raw meat, then you don't like cut any veg or anything with it. You just wash that knife straight away. But I thought like if you had raw chicken and you had raw beef, and say you was cooking them together, it's okay to use the same knife and the same chopping board.
No, yeah, you usually want to try to avoid that stuff, unless it's, and I could be wrong here. I think it's like if it's chicken to chicken or beef to beef, then it's okay. But if they're different products, then you want to try to avoid letting them mix, just because salmonella has different potential diseases associated with it than beef does. Salmonella has a high risk of I've been saying salmonella. Chicken. I've been saying salmonella this whole time. Chicken has a higher risk of salmonella, whereas beef has a higher risk of E. coli. My brain is all over the place today. I don't know why.
It's cool, man. Take your time. Just catch your
yeah, I just got off work, so my brain's all trying to recover. But yeah, so chicken has a higher risk of salmonella poisoning, whereas beef has a higher risk of E. coli. And so if you mix them, maybe you cook the chicken enough to get the salmonella off of it, but that salmonella is now on your beef, and even though you cooked it, it might not be completely off of it because you cook them in different temperatures, or because you cook them in different ways, or because you prepare them in different ways. Like, let's just say you're using ground beef to make hamburger patties. You're going to prepare that differently than you would like a chicken breast. And so because of that difference in preparation, if you cross contaminated those two, there's a higher risk that one of them is going to be infected with the other one's disease.
Oh, but obviously if you cook that, there's a good chance you'll get rid of a lot of the bad stuff.
Yeah, usually if you cook it, you'll be okay. It's just, the CDC and the FDA and all these other organizations, they try to advise you to just be safe and try to cook it and clean it as much as possible.
Yeah. Do you reckon any of the rules have changed because of COVID?
I'm sure there's been some, but there hasn't been. So the big thing with COVID, and I've gotten this question before, COVID doesn't really impact food a whole lot. Like I've been asked before if any of the crops have suffered because of COVID, or if any of the animals have suffered because of COVID. It doesn't really impact the crops or the animals all that much. The crops, COVID isn't a disease that crops can contract. It's not a disease that can really get on food. I'm sure, like, if somebody has it and they're breathing on your food, you probably don't want to eat that food at that point. But that's more of like a, now the germs are just there all of a sudden. It's not like, there's no risk of contamination. If somebody touches a cutting board and then you put your food on it, as far as I know, there's no risk of contamination with that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I'm sure that the food safety standards have they've been getting stricter over the years anyway. So I'm sure they've gotten stricter with everything going on right now, just to try to maintain safety. But I don't think that COVID has a direct correlation with food safety concerns, as far as I know.
Oh, okay. I always thought it would have impacted it just a little bit, because obviously I imagine there'd be less workers because of space needed, especially like in factories. Maybe not.
So that's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
Yes. In the agricultural industry, yes, COVID actually has a massive effect. And not in terms of the infectious part of things, but in terms of the, like you said, it shuts things down. There's less workers available. There's less, we had a lot of issues with people seeing on Facebook that farmers were dumping milk, or that they're having to prematurely euthanize pigs, or that they're having to kill their cows, or all this kind of stuff, which was terrible. And the farmers were suffering because of that kind of stuff. But they were getting mad that there was a lack of availability of milk and beef and pork in the stores, and that what was there was so costly that it was almost like not even worth buying. And so, as much as I understand those concerns, I think that people often tend to forget, and this is part of the reason why this conversation is so important. They forget how that farm to fork process works. It's not that the farmers didn't have enough, product. What's the word I'm looking for? Products. It's that they couldn't get them to the stores. So
yeah,
like you mentioned with the processors, you have a beef shortage, let's just say, because there was a beef shortage at the start of the pandemic. It's not because there's not enough beef. It's because they can't get the beef to the processor because the processor is shut down because of COVID regulations. You can't have a certain number of workers in there, so the processor has slowed down so much that the beef farmer can't put his cows through, and he has to slaughter them prematurely. So the farmer and the consumer are losing out in this department. The processor is too, but not nearly as much as the other two sides of the equation. And that's the part of the conversation that gets forgotten, as people realize that there is an increase in price of food and a decrease in quantity of food, but they don't know why. And that's the reason. It's just because all those middle steps came to a screeching halt when all of this started happening.
Oh, but more people are more quick to blame, so they instantly blame the farmers.
Exactly. And that tends to be the issue, is that, when they don't understand what's happening to their food, they blame the farmers. And sometimes it is the farmer's fault. You have to be honest whenever your industry messes up, and occasionally the farmers do mess up. But because of the number of steps in between the farmer and the consumer, the chances that it's the farmer's fault are slim to none.
Damn, okay. I never really realized it like that. I mean, over here, especially in the UK, I mean, obviously, like, farms are here and they're obviously busy, but it's very rare, like, especially where I was from, Tipton, and like now in London, that I'll even like see a farm. It's me thinking of a farm now. It's so I just don't think of it, because I'm just like, oh, I can just get my food from the shop. Like, I don't think of where it's actually come from. I just think, oh, it's in the shop. I'll just get it from the shop. They'll always have more.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It's probably a bad mindset to have, but
no, you're the norm, essentially. People tend to think that way. They tend to think, why should I care about what the farmers are doing, because I have food readily available in the grocery store? Well, that's the case until you don't have food readily available in the grocery store. Then you start to care what the farmers are doing. And we've seen that happen. I actually had people contact me to be on the podcast because they started to realize that there was an issue getting food in the grocery stores, and they wanted to know more about the process that happens in. That way they can understand why it's not the farmer's fault necessarily. And I think that the more we have those conversations, the better the situation is going to be. I think that's that's the entire goal of my podcast, is to get more awareness about this kind of stuff out there. That way people aren't so quick to blame the farmer for everything. And there are certain things, like I said, there are certain things that the farmer needs to be held accountable for. It's just a matter of having the conversation of how much of this is the farmer's fault and how much of this is just people not understanding what's actually happening behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good way that you're actually doing it, like, through a podcast as well, because I knew that obviously, like, it comes from a farm, it goes to, like, the shops, but I never knew there was, like, I've said this again, I never knew there was so many different steps. And I never knew that I'd never realized, sorry, I'm messing up my words. I never realized that farmers actually got the blame for a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty interesting to hear. So you never hear about that stuff. Like, this is probably the first time I've heard about it since we had, like, foot and mouth disease over here, and everyone went a bit mad with the farmers. But that's the only time then.
Right. Yeah. And some of like with instances like that, sure, like there's definitely, because all of those diseases have to originate from somewhere, and usually they do originate from the farm. And at that point, yes, the farmers, there are things that the farmers could have done to prevent that kind of stuff from happening. And in that instance, then sure, I'm all for people getting mad at the farmers because they should have done better. But when it's, when it's not the farmer's fault and people are blaming the farmers is when I start to have an issue with it, because they just don't know what's actually happening. And, you know, like you mentioned, a lot of people don't realize that the farmers get blamed for a lot, and it's because the general public isn't necessarily the ones blaming the farmers. You see, you see politicians blaming farmers. You see activist groups blaming farmers. You see all these people on social media blaming farmers. Those are the ones that we're having to watch out for. And yes, they're in the minority. A lot of people, the general public for the entire world, generally trust agriculture if they even think about it, you know, because a lot of people don't even think about agriculture on a daily basis, which is fair. You know, a lot of people don't even realize that their food comes from a farm. A lot of people think it just shows up in the grocery store. And that's another thing I've been trying to work against too, is, you know, that mentality. But for the most part, people who are in support of agriculture, or who, you know, maybe they have a neutral position on it, they're not the ones blaming farmers, but they're being convinced by other people on social media that farmers are bad, and it's causing this flux in communication that's dangerous for the farmer at the end of the day.
I mean, it's pretty mad what social media can actually do, especially when it pushes out like lies as well with farms.
Yep, no, absolutely.
Because like social media, like there's so many like fake stuff now where it's like when COVID hit, there was like fake photos of the army and stuff like that saying they're locking down cities. No, it's just whatever's popular. So if like farmers are in a bad position and that's what's popular, they're just going to flood the farmers with it.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. That tends to be the trend from what I've seen. And agriculture is kind of in a weird position in media. We're very new to the game. A lot of people don't really pay attention to agriculture in the media, just because we're still trying to figure out how to be in the media and how to spread our message. And so that's kind of a difficult thing too, is, you know, they've been out there telling our story for us for a long time and they've been telling it wrong. Well, now that we're here to tell our story, nobody believes us because we haven't been here for so long. And so that lack of communication on our part is really dangerous too. It's, you know, that's why I tend to not blame consumers for not knowing what's going on in the ag field and then getting mad at the farmers, because the farmers aren't doing a great job of explaining themselves, you know. And so there's a lot of holes in the issue here. It's not that, you know, there's not a clear issue going on. It's, you know, because like I said, it's not the farmer's fault for everything, but it's not the consumer's fault for not knowing that. You know, there's definitely blame to be made on both sides, and there's blame to be taken away on both sides, if that makes sense. Like,
oh yeah, that makes sense. There needs to be that back and forth. I mean, I don't really watch the news that much, but obviously, like sometimes I'll check articles or I have a look see what's online. But there's never anything that says, you know, like farmers blamed, or there's never any news about farming. What I've seen, unless I just don't look hard enough. So
it's not a whole lot in the news from what I've seen. It's mostly on social media is kind of where a lot of that comes from. But you see, there are politicians that are blaming farmers for like climate change issues, for example, or you know, there's politicians who are working on legislation that is supposed to be environmentally friendly that damages agriculture. You know, I'm sure you've heard of the Green New Deal that is going on in the United States right now.
No, what is it?
So the Green New Deal is essentially a piece of legislature that was proposed by a politician here in the United States. And she essentially wanted to make the United States completely environmentally friendly, completely eco-friendly, completely green, however you want to word it. But the ways she wanted to go about it were the problem. She wanted to kill all cows by the year 2040, I think it was. All cows gone. And, you know, so what was it? All cows are gone. All fossil fuels are completely gone. All air travel is completely banned. Everything, you know, she had like this list of like all these different things that she wanted to do to save the planet. None of it was realistic. I mean, there was no way we're going to convert to entirely energy sufficient cars by that time. There's no way we're going to be able to kill all of our cows by that time. There's no way we're going to be able to completely transfer away from air travel by that time. Like, it just didn't make any sense to me. And so a lot of people didn't take it seriously. Some people did. Some people thought that it was a great idea and they wanted to go full steam with it. But is that kind of stuff that's causing a false narrative on what agriculture is actually doing? They made a big point about how agriculture is dangerous for the environment, about how it's causing climate change, about how these cows are causing methane emissions that are damaging the earth. None of that is supported by evidence. I mean, agriculture has a footprint on the environment, sure, but every industry does, and it's not a super heavy one. I mean, the automotive industry has way more of a footprint than agriculture ever has, and agriculture is getting better by the day. I mean, we're producing technology that's reducing our carbon footprint, our methane footprint, or just our environmental impact overall, way more than any other industry is doing right now. And so, like, it's stuff like that I've been trying to actively speak against. You have politicians that are out in the field saying it's all the farmers' fault that climate change is happening, and really we're not doing all that much.
That's damn. I had no idea that was it this that politician, she wants to get rid of planes, she wanted to kill off cows.
Yes.
But how, I don't get how people can say that that's a good idea, because we need cows, we need planes. Like, the thing is, now technology is just going too far where it's going to become like, I love technology, like my whole world revolves around technology, but it's going to go too far one day and we're just not going to be able to like live without the stuff, and like we just won't change. Like, if someone says now, you'll never be able to fly again, people get so annoyed and they'll start caring about the smaller stuff that we actually need, like plants, or we need animals, like cattle, we need pigs, we need all this stuff. But it just doesn't seem to be like that now. Everyone wants to get rid of stuff, and it's not that simple.
Right. No, exactly. And that's kind of the main purpose of my, of all my ranting, is essentially, there's certain things that we cannot get rid of. Like, I'm all for technological advancement. I mean, agriculture is constantly improving their technology. I love technology. I'm a big science nerd. Technology has always been an interest of mine. There's a certain line that we have to draw where we can say, okay, this is not something we can do. We can't get rid of this stuff. We can't change to this thing. We can't do this because it's not going to work. And not only is it not going to work, it's going to hurt people so badly if we try this that it's not even worth thinking about. Like, why are we humoring the idea that we're going to kill every cow in the world? You know how many cows there are in the world? Like,
I mean, it's going to be like tracking. It's going to be like a manhunt, tracking every single damn bloody cow.
Right. And like, what are you going to do after you kill all of them? Like, where are we going to put all that? Like, we're going to have a massively abundant meat supply for a few years, and then it's all going to spoil. And what are we going to do? Like, there's so much that is just, it doesn't make sense. And that's, she's more on the radical side. And a lot of those conversations that those politicians are having are more radical ideas. And so I do have to admit that that's not how like the average American thinks, and I'm grateful for that. But it's people like that can get supporters on those ideas that need to be what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, we need to have somebody out there that's saying, no, let's not do this. This is not a good idea. This is not going to work, and it's not our fault. And so that's kind of that's the long and short of what the purpose of what I'm trying to do is, get more information out there, get people to actually do their own research. That's another thing too. I'm not trying to advocate for the idea that I'm an expert on any of this stuff or that I have all the answers. I just want people to do more research, to be more aware of what's going on in their lives, to be, more active in their environment instead of just sitting by and letting everything that they're told to them become the truth.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Now people have to care about it, to do research into it. Like, people just won't research into it just for no reason unless they really want to know about it. But it's just like you said, it's getting that message out there without obviously like people spreading lies or changing voice clips or changing like messages to make it look bad on the farmers.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so I think that there's just a lot to be said in terms of how we handle these conversations, what we go about, in what ways we go about educating the public about this kind of stuff. And I think that one of the ways that I've been really working on it is I think that the solution is making agriculture part of the mainstream conversation again. And agriculture hasn't really been a mainstream topic for a long time. I mean, like we haven't considered agriculture something that is a common discussion topic for, I don't know how, maybe 10 years, maybe longer, 20 years. I don't know. Agriculture is not at the forefront of people's minds anymore. And so I've been kind of taking, steps towards trying to improve that. And that actually kind of transitions into another topic that I wanted to bring up before we closed out, which was, like you said, you have a background in video game design and that kind of stuff. I've been approaching agriculture as a pop culture topic. So relating it to video games, relating it to movies, relating it to, putting it in a context that people can actually relate to it and find it interesting, because agriculture is a very modern topic. People just tend to think about it in an ancient way. They think, the farmer is like a guy in overalls with a straw hat, and he's milking one cow and he's got a cornfield. And that's just, that's not how things work anymore. We have very advanced, professionals in the industry. We have technology that most people wouldn't even believe exists yet. We have robotic milkers, we have drones, we have artificial intelligence. We have all this stuff that people don't even realize is in the industry. And so that's why I'm trying to take the perspective of, okay, how can I bring this to the public in a way that they're going to accept it? And I think the ticket that I found to that is, like I mentioned, putting in a language that everyone speaks. Pop culture, movies, video games, all that kind of stuff. And so like I've had episodes talking about agriculture in movies. I had an episode where we talked about agriculture in Star Wars and agriculture in The Martian and agriculture, that kind of stuff. So, in your experience with video games, I know this is kind of like a off the wall topic, but like, have you seen examples of like agriculture, of farming, of that kind of stuff in some of the things you've worked on?
Not that I've particularly worked on, but I have saw them in game, like especially like the big one. Obviously, it's going to be the big one, Farming Simulator.
Right.
Big one. Like it's all about farming. It's all about using tools. It's all about using techniques. But by the way, I had no idea. Like you guys had drones, like farms. That's pretty mad. There was another game. I forgot the name of it, but it'll come to me. Where I don't know if it's exactly agriculture, but it's very accurate. Where you need to grow these crops. It was one of the first RPGs made, and you have to grow crops, and it takes 6 months in real time to grow these crops.
Oh wow!
And you have to look after them. And then my friend was playing in it, and a bird come and ate all the crops. So his character started death. But you have to check it obviously like, every day, like a real life thing. Like you have to look after this, otherwise the person in your game will starve to death and they will die, and you'll have to start all again.
Huh? That sounds really interesting.
Pretty mad. I'll see if I can find it, but I don't want to type because obviously I'll ruin the mic.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, so one of the things I talked about on actually another person's podcast once was agriculture is in video games a lot more than we tend to think it is. So have you ever heard of Stardew Valley?
Yeah. Oh my god, I completely forgot about Stardew Valley. I love that game. I own it twice.
Oh yeah,
Stardew Valley is brilliant.
Yes, I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah.
That's a great example of agriculture in video games. And yes, you own a farm, but the farming aspects of it are actually probably the least accurate part of the farming of the agriculture element to it. What I mean by it being a good example of agriculture, the biggest struggle of Stardew Valley, as I'm sure you know, is that you have so much to do and no time or energy to get it all done.
Yeah, it's tricky. Like maybe the first 2 or 3 days, maybe stretch it a week, you'll be fine because you just get parsnips, you plant them, you water them, you're fine. But when you want to I want to make a bigger farm, I want to make more stuff. You don't have that energy to walk around with that watering can all day.
Right.
You have
exactly
because then you've got to eat your stock that you find as well. You've got to eat your parsnips to be able to water more, and then that's where your money goes, and then your produce goes as well.
So in that context, so as someone who's played Stardew Valley, what do? Let's say you want to build a bigger farm, but you also want to go mining, and you also want to go down to the beach and fish, and you also want to go work on your relationships with people in the town.
Yeah.
How do you manage having a bigger farm with more responsibilities to do when there's still time and energy that you need to be spending in other areas?
So personally, what I do, the first few days, I will just get parsnips just to get a bit of income. Once I want that bigger farm, I'll fish for a whole 2 days, and I'll collect as much fish as possible, and I'll store it. after that, I'll keep playing until I get the water fountains, and that's when I'll start to create the bigger farm where the sprinklers are just not the fountain. Sorry, the sprinklers will water most of the plants for me, and I'll always check the weather as well on the TV, just in case, because if it rains, you don't have to water them, then you can use more energy to meet people in town. So it's all about planning your day, really. And especially in the mines. The mines, if I'm going to the mines, I don't do anything with the crops, not on that day. It's impossible unless it rains.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. So that is a perfect description of agriculture, essentially. Since the beginning of time all the way to today, agriculture has always been about what is the best way I can allocate my resources, time, and energy to make the most productive game I can, essentially. If you wanted to think about it like a game, that's essentially what farmers are doing today.
Yeah.
A lot of people are opposed to the way that we use modern practices, like, we have robotics, like I mentioned, we have like the drones, we have robots, we have artificial intelligence working in agriculture. There are some people that are opposed to that kind of stuff. They think that we should be more traditionalists. There are people who more opposed, or who are more on board with the idea of like organic farming, where we don't use pesticides, we don't use any kind of fertilizers, we don't use kind of any sprays, we just kind of leave it alone. With that kind of stuff, there is a lot of controversy over why we are using newer methods versus older methods. And I always point to Stardew Valley as my example. Farmers have 1,000,001 things to do. They have to produce their product, but also they have to enhance their farm. They have to pay their bills. They have to take care of their family. They have other responsibilities going on.
Yeah.
So how do you expect them to manage all of those things without advancing their techniques? And so in Stardew Valley, like you mentioned, a lot of it has to do with stockpiling. A lot of it has to do with predicting the weather. A lot of it has to do with understanding how the markets are going to be working. A lot of it has to do with building relationships with the town. That way they can help you with your farm. And technological advancement is one of the best things you can ask for. And so while it is a game about farming, people tend to not realize just how accurate it really is to how farming is in real life. There's a lot of planning involved. There's a lot of understanding of markets and times and all this kind of stuff involved. There's a lot of relationship building involved. There's a lot of technological advancement that's needed to be able to manage that kind of stuff. And so that kind of, when I bring that up, it makes a lot of sense to people, but it also kind of blows their mind a little bit that they're basically farmers in a virtual world.
Yeah, that's pretty mad. I mean, I always thought of it just like, oh, I'm farming on a game. This is pretty cool, but I've never thought about it like, this is like very similar to like real life farming.
It is, and
go on, sorry,
go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the things about the organic thing, now, what you mentioned, where the farmers shouldn't use, some people want farmers to be more organic. My opinion is like, if they want their food organic, they should probably grow it themselves, because farmers have, like you said, a lot to do. Like, they've got families, and a lot of things that's always said in the game industry is, work smart, don't work hard. Because if you have a tool, if you can make a tool where you can, produce 100 models instead of individual ones, you may as well use that tool. It's going to help you. It's going to save you time. It's going to save you energy. That energy can be spent somewhere else. The energy that you save can be spent on resources as well to help other people, or just have time to yourself. So, I always say work smart, don't work hard.
Yep, work smarter, not harder.
Yep,
no, exactly. And that's kind of the mentality behind agricultural innovation in the first place. It's all about how can we produce the most amount of food possible on the least amount of land using the least amount of resources. And that's essentially what farmers are having to do now, because our population is just going and going and going, and it's predicted to reach like about 10 billion people by the year 2050. We're supposed to go up another 2 billion in population, and we're going to have less land. We're going to have less resources. We're going to have more regulation. We're going to have more, there's going to be so much against farmers. It's almost a miracle that we'll be able to grow food at all. And so that's why I've been having the conversation of, you may not like the idea that farmers are having to use GMOs or pesticides or antibiotics or that kind of stuff. But when they have so much to do, how are you going to tell them that they can't, essentially? They have to grow that food. We have to feed our population, or else we're going to starve. We can't afford to not use every tool in our disposal to make sure that food is grown as abundantly, as safely, and as healthily as possible. And so that's kind of my Stardew Valley is kind of one of my go-tos to explain that point. But farming is all over the place in video games. I mean, farming is actually a term that we use in video games. It's also called grinding, but I'm sure you're familiar with the term farming. You know, you kill something over and over and over again to get the same result. But yeah, that's so what's kind of funny about that is, you know, insanity is described as doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Farming is kind of like that too.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about farming as well, like especially in games, because I mean, I've done it myself. I'm just farming just to literally get a level, and it's just like, I don't think this level's going to do anything, but I want to be like level 37 instead of 36, and I don't know what it is. It's just like, oh, okay, I'll do it. But even though I'm trying to do it and I'm doing the same thing over and over again, my energy is going where that energy could be spent somewhere way more useful.
Right. And so yeah, it's just it's a matter of being able to manage your resources well, you know, and energy as a resource, being able to manage your time well, being able to manage, you know, where you want to put your attention, and is it worth it for what you're trying to do. And it's all about having end goals in mind, you know, how much of this thing do you want to have done by this amount of time, and how much time are you going to spend working on it until you decide that it's not worth it anymore. And so that kind of stuff is stuff that farmers have to take in mind too. There's, you know, I could go into depth in terms of like all the different games that I've pulled examples for farming out of. I mean, you have Minecraft, you have Stardew Valley, you have like there's tons of examples of games that have farming as an element, either in a literal way or in a very, very metaphorical way, kind of like I mentioned. But at the end of the day, I've been trying to prove the point that the agriculture is everywhere, you know, whether it's in a physical form or if just the elements of agriculture are in other things that we do. There's a certain, you know, aspect of it that just kind of is always part of our lives. And so, you know, if I can help people understand that by relating it to video games or movies or whatever, I'm going to do it, because I think it's important for them to learn that. And it tends to kind of, you know, interest people whenever I can relate it to stuff like that. You know, when I tell them that, you know, farming is in video games that they don't even think about, and they go back and look at it, they're like, huh, I never noticed that, but you're right, it is in there. And that kind of stuff is cool to me. I think it's kind of interesting.
It is a pretty cool way to look at the same thing that you've looked at a while ago, but in a completely new way.
Right.
Like,
no, exactly.
Next time I'm playing Stardew Valley, I'll be like, oh, God damn you, Brendan.
Perfect. I've ruined him. No, I had a podcast that I was on where we were talking about agriculture and movies. And he said that every time he watched a movie after that, he just could not look at it the same way. Like, he just saw things popping out of him. He's like, oh, that reminds me of this thing that we talked about, and that reminds me. And I was like, good, it's now stuck in your head. I've done my job.
Yeah Spread the message. But that's cool though, because I've got other friends that play Stardew Valley, and I'll talk to them about it, because I never realized how it was. God damn.
Right. Yeah, exactly. it's something that, you know, and like I said, not everyone has to, you know, you don't have to understand that stuff to appreciate the game. It's a fun game, and you should be able to enjoy it just for being a fun game. But the entire idea is that I'm trying to bring, you know, this conversation about our food and how we get it into the mainstream. And it helps a lot being able to relate it to things that's already there, you know, relating it to things that people are really interested in. I've been, you know, like have you heard about like the foodies?
The foodies? No, sorry.
So foodies are like influencers, like Instagram influencers or whatever, that they just post pictures of their food. You know, they everywhere they go, they talk about their food and what they eat.
Oh, really? I've watched like competitive eaters. Like I watch a guy called like Beard Meats Food, and Mike Chan. Like, he just shows different food, but I don't. Are they maybe fooders?
They're a little bit different. I mean, they might be foodies too, but no, foodies tend to be very like they go to exotic restaurants and they post about their meal, and they usually like they almost like they get free meals and stuff because they give advertisement to restaurants, and it's all about, you know, oh yeah, this plate of you know, this salad was grown in this field, and you know, it's all about the story of the food and all this kind of stuff. And so I don't fully understand it, but I think just people like looking at food, and so they follow them. I don't know why it's such a popular trend, but it is.
Yeah.
Anyways, I've been trying to get foodies on the podcast for a while, because I think it'd be interesting to take something that's really, really popular that people enjoy looking at and say, hey, this is all about agriculture. Like, the entire thing that you're doing is food based, and people don't even realize that half the food that you're showing them is grown in a field right outside their door. And, you know, there's so much about everything that we like, and it's not just with the foodie situation or with the video games or with the movies. There's so much in everything we do that's based around agriculture that people don't realize. The clothes you wear, the table that you have your computer on, all of it is produced, you know, through that kind of hard labor that is often overlooked. And so when people start to realize how much of their lives really revolve around this stuff and how much, basically how screwed they would be without it, it starts to kind of open their eyes a bit to why it's important to understand, you know, what's going on behind the scenes, why it's important to vote on, why it's important to not listen to social media all the time, you know, why it's important to have these conversations about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult now to obviously try and get people off and not listen to social media, because with so many influencers now, like if you like an influencer, well, someone who's, let's probably say, a little bit younger, if an influencer says something, you're just going to agree with them, whatever.
Right. No, exactly. And in the, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that's one of the problems, where if influencers have like a young audience, they can really corrupt the minds.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the influencer problem is definitely one that I've addressed before that I think needs to be worked on. But the, you know, the entire idea is like, maybe, and that's kind of something that we've been talking about in the ag media sphere too, is maybe we don't get them to stop listening to social media, but if we can get our voice just as loud as their voice, then we'll be okay. You know, because now they have a choice. They can listen to this guy or they can listen to us, and we're the same, you know, we're the same size. Right now, there aren't any ag media channels that are that big. And it's not about getting big for the popularity. It's about getting big so that way the word is out there, and about getting, you know, the awareness to the information.
Yeah, so you want to obviously, like, you want to share the information, make people realize, hey, this is all the effort that goes into your food. Stop blaming them farmers.
Yeah, and you know, not just the effort, but also, you know, there's this much work put into the process too. You know, all the regulation, all the inspection, all that kind of stuff. Like there's, you know, an insane amount of complexity, and the technology too. You know, people, like you mentioned, you didn't know that we use drones. A lot of people don't. A lot of people don't know we use robots. A lot of people don't know that we use chemicals for certain things and not chemicals for other things. And, you know, a lot of people don't know what's actually happening behind the scenes. And when they find out, they're usually really interested. Some of them are terrified, but they're usually pretty interested.
Oh, well, that's the thing as well. Like when we were just talking about it, I mean, I had no idea it had all this, and now I've just had all this information. And I think it's good the way you've actually showed it through, like you said, pop culture, like films, games, TV shows, I imagine as well. And I think it gets people more interested in it.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like it does, at least. I mean, I've had a pretty decent number of people respond to me on, you know, like I said, we did an episode where we talked about Star Wars and agriculture. I actually went into online Star Wars communities and I posted questions to them that we were talking about in the episode. And they responded, and they were like super excited to discuss stuff because it was Star Wars. They didn't realize they were talking about agriculture too, though. But now when they go look at those products in the, you know, in the store, that conversation will come back to their mind, and they'll be thinking about their, you know, their purchasing decisions and their voting decisions more. And that's kind of the plan at the end of the day. Like, it's not necessarily subliminal messaging, but it's kind of like the same idea. It's like the Pavlov effect. You know, like you attach, you know, you attach one reaction to another. So you get them really excited to talk about Star Wars. Well, they're talking about farming too. So now whenever they think of Star Wars, they'll think of farming, and they'll care about it more.
Yeah, because obviously it's something that they care about into something new, which is actually a really, really cool way of doing
it. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that, I mean, that, like I said, that's kind of been my method to introducing this stuff to the general public. Whether or not it works, I mean, we'll see. It's been working pretty okay so far, but we'll see if it continues to work that way. But I mean, if it gets people interested, that's all I'm looking for.
I think it will get people interested because, sorry,
good.
Had to clear my throat. I think it will get people more interested because as long as you link it to something they're interested in, they'll always carry it around with them as well. Like every time I know I play Stardew Valley there, I'll be like, oh shit, yeah, agriculture.
Yep. No, exactly. So I think that's, you know, that's really, at the end of the day, that's the goal. And so if we're if I'm getting stuff stuck in your head about Stardew Valley, then I'm doing my job just fine.
Yeah, I think you're doing a wicked job, mate.
Well, I appreciate that. I think that that's all that I had. Do you have any other questions for me? Anything else you want to talk about, or?
I think on the top of my head, I think you pretty much covered it all because I didn't really know too much.
Well, yeah, like I said, if you come up with any other questions or if you come across anything on social media, you know how to get a hold of me, and we can always do a follow-up episode or whatever,
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll have a look into some stuff and I'll get some more questions ready for you.
Awesome.
I'll shoot them at you.
Yeah, well, I hope that I wasn't talking too much. I tend to do that quite a bit.
No, it's fine. It's all information. I mean, because I never really knew too much about it. I know you mentioned it on my podcast, but I didn't understand like the actual depths of agriculture.
Well, that's the point. Not many people do.
That's mad. That's actually really cool, though.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, so like I said, if you find anything else you want to talk about, you're more than welcome to come back on the podcast. I'm always happy to have another guest on. But I think that's all I got.
Oh, perfect. All right, I'll do some research.
Sounds great. All right. So yeah, before we close out here, you want to go ahead and plug your podcast or anything else you want to share?
Yeah, sure. So oh fuck, I forgot my name. So I'm the host of the Raw Life podcast. I talk to strangers. I normally just post on Reddit and they get in contact with me if they want to share the story. I ask them questions, like what's the best experience, what's the worst experience, tell me an embarrassing story. And it's just a conversation for around about an hour and we just talk about yourself. That's pretty much sums it up.
Oh yeah. No, it's a lot of fun. I was actually on an episode of it a few weeks past. It was actually one of your earlier episodes, wasn't it?
It was. Now I've got a better mic.
No, it sounded great. So, yeah, I definitely recommend you guys go checking out the Raw Life podcast, and I'll be sharing that around whenever this episode drops, so you guys can go listen to my episode on his podcast, and go check out the other great episodes he's had on there with people more interesting than me. And yeah, so I think it's been a lot of fun. So, is there anything else you wanted to add on to that? Anything you want to close with?
I just want to say thank you for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it, Brendan. It's been knowledgeable.
Well, I hope so. I really appreciate you agreeing to come on here. It's always nice to catch up with people I've worked with before.
Yeah, it's banging.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I will. I'll link all your stuff down in the description if you want to share it with me, and I'll definitely be reaching out to you again. If you have anything else for me, just let me know. We can connect again and do a.
That sounds class. I mean, don't you worry. I'll find you some questions.
I'm looking forward to it. I am looking forward to it. So yeah, that's all I have for you. So thanks again so much for joining me for this episode. Thanks to all my listeners for tuning in. And don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.